All right, so now let's get into, we're still in the mood of that Independence Day speech. I'm sure you've seen a lot of reactions. I think the latest has been the defense coming from a special advisor to President Bola Tinubu, Dr. Tope Fashua, over the weekend. I wonder if you saw that, and he reeled out some of the gains and how some people are not happy about that and all of that. But let's get more perspectives on that. And of course, we have the movement of inflation. If you could have that slide, the movement of inflation since 2022, that was just before President Bola Tinubu came on. Up till now, we've seen the changes. Of course, we've seen 5 consecutive drop in inflation. That's what's celebrating. Even though Ghana has beaten us to it, Ghana is back to the single-digit inflation zone, but we are still doing double digits. And I think I did see an international body say we're going to do about 14% next year. So we are still on doing about double digits, obviously. We've seen GDP also grow also over the past years and quarter on quarter since President Bola Tinubu came on. We've seen the value of Naira stabilize. Whether you want to call it a gain or reduction, that's up to you. But at least we've seen the gap between the official and unofficial markets. We've seen that reduce drastically, and we've seen a level of stability and certainty, or certainly predictability, in the value of Naira. But what we haven't seen, however, has been the movement or the translation of these macroeconomic benefits or wins to the micro, that's touching the life of individuals. And so we see, when we talk about, for instance, the Nigeria's multidimensional poverty index, we still see that still high, because in 2022, 63% of the population were said to be poor by the World Bank. That's multidimensional poor, experiencing deprivation in health, in education, and living standards. By the time we moved to 2023, that was when President Bola Tinubu came into power or into office. The World Bank placed that at between 46 to 47%, affecting about 104 million Nigerians. By 2024, last year, World Bank placed it at about 54%, representing another increase. So while we see these very impressive macroeconomic numbers, it doesn't look like that's translating to the micro. And this year now, World Bank has said that about over 75% of rural Nigerians and 41.3% of urban Nigerians were living in poverty. But of course, we do remember that the president has told us that the worst is over. So do we say that after this period now, we will not see those numbers anymore? Well, we have to dissect these issues. So right here in the Lagos studio, we have the Chief Executive Officer of RTC Advisory Services Limited, Mr. Kwemi Agbaje. Good morning, Mr. Agbaje. Thank you so much for...
A pleasure to be here.
And then in our Abuja studio, we have investment and economic development expert, Mr. Ogbonna Okuku, also joining us to discuss this. Mr. Okuku, good morning and welcome to the program.
All right, thank you so much for having me, Ini.
All right, let me start with you on your thoughts about the president's speech, especially that part where he said that the worst is over.
Okay, so the best way to look at it is, first things first, when programs are designed by government, when government decides that there's going to be a strategy to deliver on a particular economic structure. Now, one of the things that the government has been able to do is to, first of all, eliminate the fuel subsidy regime, and again to also restructure the foreign exchange market. So those two things definitely have been a big burden on our country, and those two major issues. There have been two major issues in our country, because before now we've been living in a bubble, because it would have been too difficult for anybody to know the actual worth of this country with those kind of things existing side by side. It's just like a pregnant woman with a very massive fibroid in the womb growing at the same time. So it would have been, is that the baby is going to get suffocated, or the woman loses her life. So we're getting to that place where it's either Nigeria collapses or the entire economy collapses. So I think yes, it was one of the most painful decisions that the present administration took, but I still believe that it's one of the best decisions, because that decision have led to us now having the level of stability we're having in our foreign exchange market. Two, then we now know we have a structure that will work, and then the subnationals are now receiving more money. So as against monies, those subsidies servicing a few, because it was just there servicing a few lifestyles, because it's only those that had large fleets of cars that were enjoying, and then those who were racketeering with the entire structure that were benefiting from it. But for now things have changed. We have enough liquidity to support the subnationals, to support government programs, to develop more infrastructure that is required, and then bring out programs that would help grow the economy. But nevertheless, that is not the end of it all, because that's the beginning. So for me, we have laid a foundation, and the president making that particular phrase means that yes, the worst days have passed. So we are now entering into that space where we will now begin to grow the economy. We will now begin to, grow the economy properly. So any growth you see will definitely translate to lives of people, into people's personal income, and then that would also, drive growth, actual growth in the economy in a very short time.
Yeah, Mr. Gbeja, I wonder if you agree with him and the president's phrase and the fact that, or his perception that the economy is now stable, so growth is what we're looking for.
I completely agree with him, and I was going to start on exactly the same tone with which he started, which is that most people have this mindset of incremental change. So they thought that the government should come in and just make incremental change. But what President Tinubu did in 2023 was fundamental structural reforms. And when you avert disaster, tragedy, you may not appreciate it. The country was clearly, if you looked at our central bank with ways and means of maybe 30 trillion, at least 23 trillion, if you looked at our central bank with net foreign reserves of just $3 billion, if you looked at our NNPC with most of its production sold ahead of time, if you went back to the central bank and looked at obligations, foreign currency obligations in excess of $7 billion, the country, and even the fuel subsidy that people thought they were enjoying, was it paid for? Or were debts accumulating for fuel subsidies at the NNPC? So we were headed for disaster, bankruptcy, tragedy. And so ignorance is bliss. When you are ignorant of the dangers around which you are treading, you may feel that everything is okay. But if you are interested in educating yourself, looking at the data, looking at the direction of things, you'll be grateful to this government for averting the tragedy, which would have resulted in more severe pain for our people. Imagine Nigeria's social situation as 2023, or even today, and compare if the country had gone into bankruptcy. And then there would have been, you think you have crime, you would have an explosion of instability. So I, based on all we know, and most Nigerians should know too, we averted tragedy, we carried out fundamental structural reforms. In my view, it is almost miraculous that in just 2 years, we have recovered to the extent to which we have. I don't need to churn out. President Tinubu did a good job of churning out the data. You've repeated some of them. So it's almost miraculous that we are where we are today. We have had recovery in virtually every indices of economic performance. Foreign exchange, inflation, growth, GDP, trade surpluses, all of that. And for those who say that these things are not yet translating to the people, yeah, maybe the data is not yet saying so, but the data will lag. If there is growth, if GDP growth is at 4.23, there's more production, there will be more employment. If inflation has declined from 30-something to 20%, there will be increasing. Yes, I do admit that we would like inflation to go down to single digit, but the burden of purchasing, of consumption will be improving. We know those things from economic principles, where we know that GDP growth means more employment. We know that. We know that declining inflation means the burden of consumption is reducing. We know that. We know that trade surpluses means our foreign balance of payments is improving to the benefit of our economy. We know that stabilization in the exchange rate means better planning for companies, better employment.
But how long, Mr. Agbaje, do we have to wait for this lag?
I would prefer we wait than that we had blundered into a tragedy. Like I said, I even think that the results we're already seeing are remarkable, given the relative. When you make fundamental structural economic reforms, you wait. And we are beating, I think. I wrote recently that even the reforms of President Obasanjo, which he started from telecoms in 2001, which he went into banking and all of that. When did we get the World Bank? After like 6 years or 7 years of President Obasanjo. So let's understand the reality of structural reforms. If you want to make incremental changes and you tweak it and postpone the evil day, yes, you might go ahead thinking that things have gone well. But when you want to make fundamental reforms, yes, the pain may be more, but the rewards are greater. And I think that I'm impressed with the rewards so far.
Okay, so a major one, obviously, the subsidy removal. And Mr. Okuku there also brought it to our attention how this has made more revenue available to government, especially the subnationals, the local government, the state government. But then how much of that have really gone to the lives of the people, the welfare of the people? We've seen multinational, multidimensional poverty there not improving. How much of it?
I must say that I do not totally disagree. I think our subnationals, in particular, I mean, we have all these things we are really now that the president has done and the outcomes that we're seeing. But unfortunately, the president is not the class captain of governors. He's not the supervisor of governors. The supervisor of governors is their state houses of assembly and the political system in the states and in the local government. Unfortunately, we have work to do in establishing the pillars of accountability at the subnational level. And that's not, I think that one of the things that from experience we can suggest that perhaps we may consider at the federal level is publishing how much we gave you and just monthly publishing everything, so that then your systems can then, the systems established at the state level, the elites of the state, the elders of the state, the political system in the state, the voters of the state, and their house of assembly.
I guess, as you said, the voters, but people have to be interested to follow up. It doesn't seem like a lot of Nigerians are interested in following up.
That's a shame. That would be a shame. And again, that may be one of the prizes of building an accountable democratic system. I think we managed to keep attention at the federal level. And because of politics and competition for power, we managed to get the federal government to be at least responsive and accountable. And we got the president coming on here and telling us, this is my scorecard. I don't think we've managed to do the same at the state levels to the extent possible. To be fair, we've done some. We did those. I mean, I can point to one or two examples. Otoge in Kwara State was a manifestation of democratic power. And we might cite some other examples. But I think generally we can agree that at the state level, we need a little bit more political governance accountability.
Now, let me come to Mr. Okuku. Mr. Okuku, both at the subnationals and at the nationals, there are talks that we would have even seen more gains of these reforms if issues like leakages in government were dealt with. Cost of governance is another one, and then those leakages, they are really sapping off some of those gains that the people would have experienced.
Now, so looking at it holistically, there are two things that are very key here. One is we must have that confluence, the confluence economic development plan. So that means each of the subnationals and the federal government must sit together, and then we have a plan, looking at, and that plan would, look at, areas of comparative advantage for each of the states and then see how they can develop thus. That number two, the citizenry has always been a very big problem, because I always say from a state of anarchy to a centralized state, you need to have, those set of rules. You must have leadership, and then that's the people who will manage the rules. And then the most important part is actually the citizenry. And the key factor is the well-informed citizenry. Now, the citizens have to understand that at this time, is no more just the federal government providing, doing all the basic infrastructure for you. Everybody's talking about the president or the government at the center. Now, more monies are being released. Yes, my colleague there said, yes, we need to put it out there how much each of the states is, how much they are receiving. Now, if the subnationals are receiving funds and then they are not working with those funds, so there has to be some level of accountability and efficiency within the subnationals. So for that to actually happen, so the citizens of the state, because if you say state house, if you leave it just to the State House of Assembly members alone, it probably might be a bit difficult, because most of them don't have so much, autonomy to be able to, sit the governors down or sit the subnational leaders down to get them to do the right thing. So, but I think that some level of arm twisting will come from the citizen when their expectations. So we need to expand the scope of the knowledge scope for the subnational people, the citizens at the subnational, to know that if you're not getting some of these basic amenities, you need to also, focus your attention on your governor, on your local government chairman, because the reason why I believe the president said it in his speech, why he decided to make those funds available, because for him, he's been a governor, so he understands the rudiments and then the capacity and the leverage that a governor has if he or she wants to develop, his local entity. So for me, those expectations has to increase, and then again, I also have a little way I look at some of these things, because I think one of the biggest problems we have in Africa is we expect people to do the right thing. Rather, in other climes, I see that they make people do the right thing. So we need to design strategies and structures that will make the subnationals adhere to strict rules of engagement as regards economic development of the state, infrastructure development, and then making available opportunities for the people within their ecosystem to grow and then be able to develop, in the same line. Because it has to also, it happens in all sphere. When it comes to agricultural development, you need to look at things that have to, there are roads that must be constructed, roads that will support raw material supply strategy. So you look at your industrial layout, those development has to actually, be anchored around the economic development plan of those states. I say this all the time. Everybody talks about China. The entire 62% of buttons used globally comes from a small local government in China. So that means we don't have an excuse. You must not do everything. So if you find your area of comparative advantage, things that you can do within your state, there has to be a drive, and then you connect it to what's happening at the federal level, and then we have a robust financial engineering, and then we'll be able to get some of the subnationals to begin to work effectively.
And Mr. Kuku, more revenue is expected with the new tax law that's supposed to start in January, because what that's supposed to do is supposed to expand the tax net and all of that. And that means more revenue. And it would have been more reassuring if alongside the new tax law, there's also something that will compel, the efficient use of this extra revenue that will be coming.
Now, research has also shown, I like the point, you just, came in with. Study has shown that countries that, that have more people in their tax net tends to have better democracy and development. Why is that? Even the Bible says it, where a man's treasure is, that's where his heart is. It's been a case of everybody says, oh, they are eating our money. Right? No, our money is different from my money. So when people begin to pay taxes, when the people begin to adhere to, paying taxes, so it becomes my money. So you pay attention to what's going on. Because, you see election day, you see election days. I'm not saying that our electoral process is the best. But, is the participation of the citizenry that would actually, force or make sure, or is that, it's beyond advocacy, but, that will put pressure on the system to correct itself. So I am happy with the new tax law, because it's going to expand the tax net. It's going to have more people pay taxes, and that will also make every single Nigerian pay more attention. Because when monies are taken from you, you know that money is taken from you. You will feel it more, and then you want to see what that money is going for. That's when you begin to ask questions, because it is your money that is going out.
All right. Well, we do hope that will bring more commitment. But Mr. Agbaje, let's switch a bit. And in spite of this good record, and of course we've had applause from IMF, World Bank, even though they did emphasize the need for social welfare programs and all of that. And we see that this just came out, I think, over the weekend, to report that Nigeria is the third largest recipient of U.S. aid at $875 million last year, 2024. So the first is Democratic Republic of Congo and then Ethiopia. And one would have thought Nigeria shouldn't be in this category. We're a big country. We have a lot of potentials. We're making more money now and all of that. Why should we still be named at the top of this USA?
First of all, let's settle one point. Just taking from, I think the evidence of the success of Nigeria's macroeconomic reforms, it should no longer be a subject of debate. I hope that people take their anchor from people like Bayo Ogunlesi, Akim Bello Osage, Chukwuma Soludo, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the IMF, the World Bank. I hope that we don't take our economic anchor from politics. I think the evidence is now overwhelming and compelling. Now, there are legacy issues. We've gotten hooks, and I'm not a fan of aid, by the way. There's no evidence. I remember the now old book by Dambisa Moyo around aid. It's questionable. And part of why it is questionable that aid is the way to develop any economy ties back to what the other Jaga in Abuja just said. There's no accountability around aid. It didn't come from you. It's a gift. It's a gift passed through government officials and NGOs in both systems in which there's now corruption. There's no record of any economy in the world that transformed itself because people were giving them aid. So let us build the foundations of our own economy. Let us take the bitter pills that we have to swallow to make our economy more productive, to change. It's about incentives. What we have done is altering the incentive structure for participants in the Nigerian economy. Now the incentives are pay your taxes. The incentives are see what you can export because of the exchange rate system, already translating into increased exports, reduced imports, and better balance of payments. The incentives are to get into production rather than go to the central bank, beg MFLA or whoever for some dollars, or get into a racketeering petrol subsidy scheme. If you want to be wealthy, the incentives are increasingly limited to finding something to do, like build a refinery, like build a petrochemical plant, like build something, and look for where you can find a large market. So let's complete the process of altering the incentive structures around getting wealthy in Nigeria, from rent seeking to producing something. That's what the reforms are about. bottom line. And then alter some systems like taxation, help do some things to help our people, like creating a housing and mortgage system, like creating a sustainable pension system, like some, you know, and I think the government is doing all of that. You are hearing a lot about reforms in pensions, you are hearing a lot about education loans, credits, consumption loans. Those are part of the system. I also agree, by the way, that we must continue to focus. It's a continuous focus. The problems of poverty, inequality in Nigeria are deeper than something you will tweak over a 2-year period and then it will reverse. So we need, at least in my view, a decade plus of continuous looking at the social situation and saying, what can we change here? What can we do to help our people? What can we do to mitigate? I think the government is finally on that track, but there's a long way to go.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Agbaje, right there for sharing your thoughts. Mr. Kwame Agbaje is the Chief Executive Officer of RTC Advisory Services Limited. Thank you so much for your views. And also from our Abuja studio, Investments and Economic Development expert, Mr. Ogona Okuku, thank you so much for sharing your time and thoughts with us this morning.
All right, thank you so much for having me.